Inverse trig functions. When we want to find the inverse trig function, we've been given the sine, cosine, or tangent value, and we need to find the angle where that occurs. For example, using the unit circle, we can find that the answer to sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. If we turn that around, we have the inverse. The inverse sine of 1/2 is 30 degrees. So the answer to inverse problems is always the angle. Besides the inverse sine being written with the little -1, sometimes you see it written arc sine. And that's true for the cosine and the tangent as well. Restrictions as to where we can look on the unit circle to find values for inverse trig functions. Inverse sine and inverse tangent only use the right half of the circle, while inverse cosine only uses the top half of the unit circle. So if you're instructed to find exact values without a calculator, that means you're going to be using the unit circle. If your instructions don't specify degrees, you should answer in radians. So the first example is the inverse cosine of 0. We're trying to find on the circle the top half only, because it's cosine, where cosine equals 0. So we're looking at the parentheses to find what looks like this. The cosine value is 0, and it doesn't matter what the sine value is. So on the top half of the circle, where the cosine is 0, is at the very top at pi over 2. So the inverse cosine of 0 is pi over 2. The next one, arc sine, which means inverse, of square root of 3 over 2. The sine is the second number in the parentheses. So we're looking now right half of the circle only. We're trying to find where the second number in the parentheses is square root of 3 over 2. That happens at pi over 3. Arctangent of square root of 3. Again, we're only looking on the right half of the circle, and we want to find where the tangent equals square root of 3. So you can see that again at pi over 3. The inverse sine of square root of 2 over 2. So we're looking on the circle right half only, where the sine value is square root of 2 over 2. That happens at pi over 4. Sometimes you use a calculator to find values for inverses, if they are not angles that are on the unit circle especially. Here's one more. Whoops. And so you need to pay attention to your book instructions to see if your calculator should be set on degrees or radians. Now for these examples, the book I'm using does not specify degrees, so we're going to use radians. I'm making sure my calculator is set on radians. And the inverse sine, usually on most calculators, if you can find the button that says sine, inverse sine is right above it. So you have to use second or function or whatever you need to get up above the button. So I just put in the calculator the inverse sine of 0.9103, and we traditionally round to 4 places for these, so it's 1.1440. The arc cosine of 3.051, so that's the inverse cosine, but when you enter this into the calculator, you get an error. Therefore, the answer is undefined. In general, the sine or cosine of any number greater than 1 or less than -1 will be undefined.